Welcome to HealthyHouseplants.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. If you'd like to support my show and get help growing your houseplants, check out my Patreon below. Today I'm excited. We have the third in the series for rooting succulents, succulent cuttings, and getting all new plants. It's been a while since we rooted these guys, quite some time, so I'm really glad that it's time to do this. These are, if you see in the prior video, some of these were put in at that time, and then there's a few new ones. Because what happened was I was being careful not to overwater these, which you need to do because succulents die quickly from overwatering. But at the same time, it's a little bit tricky when you're rooting them because you need to keep those little baby roots watered. So I lost a few in between that didn't get watered enough. So keep an eye on it when you're doing this. Once you've propagated, like I show you in the prior two videos, you want it to, I would use a moisture meter, use your finger. You want it to be slightly wet, still slightly a little bit wet when you water them again so that you don't dry them out. But as I always say, when growing succulents indoors, do err more on the side of not watering as much than watering too much. Now, there were ones in here that were perfectly fine during that. There were just some of them that were a little more delicate. The roots were a little more delicate that didn't make it. So I put new ones in so I'd have plenty to show you. So that's what took a little bit of time in between the last video and this video. Okay, so what we're going to do is a big reveal here to see what happened here in terms of these roots and see what kind of roots we have here. So what I like to do when I am working with anything that I've rooted is you don't want to pull on it. It's not the greatest to just try to work around that. Really what the best thing is to do is to get down underneath and just really just dislodge all of the, this is a rooting medium, which I have a video on making it, and I also the recipe, and you can see it in the prior video. So this is a rooting hormone, a rooting medium, and this is my succulent cactus and succulent mix, which homemade cactus and succulent mix, which I also have a video on how to make that. So we're going to be using that to transplant these guys. So right now we're going to reveal here root systems, hopefully looking for very good root systems. When you are doing this process, you need to be very, very careful. Also, I did water this earlier today because anytime you are going to repot, even succulents, you want to make sure that the plants have been watered several hours before. I watered this about 9-10 hours ago. Even better to do it the day before, but that's good enough ahead of time there. So the plant has a chance to get nice and hydrated, because what happens when you do repot, even succulents, is that they are going to go into a little bit of a shock. That's just normal when you repot plants. Okay, we've got one here which unfortunately does not have any roots, and that's going to happen. Some things just aren't going to root, but other things will root. Now I know that some of these have definitely rooted. This was an original one that I'm going to get a little closer here for you so you can see better. This one that I'm working on right now was an original, so it should have a nice root system. Once again, being very careful. Went all the way down to the bottom of the pot to dislodge this so that I am not breaking, hopefully not breaking any roots. Okay, so here we go. We have some roots on this guy in this mix here. Not a lot of roots, but enough roots to get this plant growing nicely with a transplant. So I'm happy about that. This also doubled in size. So when you are rooting the succulents, and you see them growing, that's a sign that they do have roots, because if they wouldn't be growing if they didn't have any roots. So I'm not going to mess around with this. I'm not going to shake too much off. I do know that there are roots, very fine roots in there, so I'm going to be very gentle with it and set it down and continue to dislodge the rest of the plants to see what we're left with here. Okay, so going to do that with these here, hoping for some more roots here. Now these newer ones were put in a lot sooner. So, I mean, not as long ago. It looks like this one, which is the same as that one that didn't root, does indeed have some roots. So, oh, and I do have a little rock in here that I put in there as a decorative item so that the plants would feel like they were in a fancy environment and to help them grow better. Okay, so I'm dislodging, as you can tell here, hopefully you can see, I think you can, a few of the plants, which is fine because they're going to get intertwined, intermingled too. Okay, so we do have some nice rooting on this one here. Still pulling it out. Okay, so quite a bit of roots on that one. So this is going to happen. You can see this is the same plant here. And sometimes you'll get rootings, sometimes you won't. It just kind of varies. So that's okay. You're going to have some that just don't do it, and that's why you put a bunch in so you have some good results. So this one, nice roots on that guy. Okay. Now we've got the clump here is kind of all in one. So I'm going to go underneath it, scraping the bottom. Being very, very careful because these roots can easily dislodge from the plant, and obviously, well, that's not what we're looking for here. You could always start again. Like this one, I can put rooting hormone on it like I show you in the other videos, put it in and get it to reroot. That's not a problem. It will eventually. I may want to cut it back to a different node. Probably cut it back to right below the leaf there, which is a stem node, which it creates a root node. Let it harden off like I show you in the other video, and then try again. Okay, so I'm putting my hand all the way in here too, which is another thing you can do just to get in there and just to get these guys out. Okay, very exciting. More roots. I'm seeing more roots. Nice root system on this one as well, as you can see. Lots of good roots on that. Very nice. So that's another nice one. Okay, we've got two more here. Very nice root system on this one. This was another original one, which has doubled in size as well. So really nice roots on that guy as well. And then we have one more. This is one of the ones that hadn't root, same as the one that didn't root, and we have some more roots here. As you can see, a good little root system there. So, not bad. Out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we only had one that didn't root. So very good odds there. Very good results. Okay, now this rooting medium you can use over again. So you can rinse it really nicely, rinse it really well, leach it to basically rinse out anything that's has built up from the propagating, and then use it again. It is basically pretty much inert, made of inert materials that are just there to help you to have a place to propagate the plants. And this one is for succulents and cacti specifically. It has added sand in it, and actually you can use this actually for all types, but I believe I added extra sand into that one. Okay, anyway, so here we are with these beauties. I have different size pots here, you will notice. I had them in the foreground there. Okay, so as always, as I always say, you do not want to overpot your plants, especially cactus and succulents, which do not do well with being in too much wet soil. So I did get some bigger pots, but really these are not going to be probably going into them because they're just a little too big. So I'm going to be using these smaller ones here, and I probably am not going to pot up all of them. I'm going to show you, I'll pot up a couple here. You can also, if you have, you don't have really small pots, like these are terracotta pots, which are perfect actually for growing succulent cuttings because they don't tend to hold water. Soil dries out fairly quickly, so you don't have to worry about root rot as much. But say that you can't find little tiny ones, you don't have a lot of, we could take all of these and put these, or maybe put 2 of these into a bigger pot. Now this guy potentially could go into this pot, but I'm still a little concerned about that. So I would prefer to put maybe these 2 into that pot so that we're not having too much wet soil in there. Even though this soil is very well draining, this homemade cactus succulent mix is very well draining, you still want to be careful with that. Okay, now into the smaller pots, I'm going to put maybe this one in here. So you want to figure out potting the pot sizes and prior, depending on what you have. Pull out everything you have, and then once you see the root system, you can go ahead and figure it out from there. Now this one has a fairly good sized root system as well, so I could potentially put it in one of these, but once again, a little concerned about having just too much. I do have a couple more of these that I can get, so I am going to take this one out and get a smaller one for that and put that one in here. And then I really would like, I don't know if I want these 2 in the same, they're very different, they are different types of plants. I think I prefer them in one of these as well. So I'm going to test it out here. See, still very, what you want is you want 2/3 root to 1/3 soil. So this is perfect actually for this plant right now. So I'm going to plant this one in here. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to plant all of them, but this will give you a good idea to plant a couple of them. And then I can get my other pots after and make sure to plant them all up. Okay, so I'm watering this soil. You always want to water whatever potting soil you're using before you do repot. Because if you don't, what happens is the soil will, got a little too much water in there, interestingly. I was surprised, so I'm going to get rid of some of that. Regular potting soil tends to soak up a lot more. Okay, so you do want it to be moist because, and then for this I'm not going to water afterwards because there's plenty of moisture in here. Regular plants you do want to water too, but this I'm not going to. But you do want it to be moist because if it's not moist, what happens after you plant is when you water, everything sinks, and you do not want a plant low in the pot. That's a good way to get root rot because there's a lot of moisture when it's down below like that. You want the plant up so that the top of the surface of the soil can dry out naturally and that sort of thing. Okay, so we were working on this one, so I am going to put a little soil in there, and might be a little too much. Just a little bit on the top bottom. Now you do want to have, that's perfect. Maybe a tad bit more on the bottom. You do want to have a little bit of soil at the bottom, but you don't want to have a ton of soil at the bottom of your pot when you're repotting succulents, especially in other plants too, because that means you've got way too much, way too much soil in there. Okay, and then what you do is you fill it in, and you can do what's called tamping as you go, which basically settles the soil. That's what tamping is. And also pushing with your fingers is also tamping. Okay, so I'm filling in, as you can see, I'm filling in some soil. This is definitely going to have more soil than it well, it had a lot of soil in that, but this is real soil for it now. And it's definitely, even though this is a small pot, it's still giving it a fair amount of soil. Okay. Once again, pushing with your fingers. Now I do see there are some roots right there on the side of the stem. So I have an option of putting this down so that the roots can make contact, which is not a bad idea because the more roots, the better with a new cutting. So I'm going to push, I pushed it down a little bit and I made soil contact. So it will likely continue to grow. Now it's going to grow a little crooked out in the pot, but that's okay. It's going to grow into the soil at that contact point too, because the more roots, the better. The better your chance of having a plant that acclimates, takes hold, starts growing, and turns into a gorgeous, gorgeous plant. Okay, so that one is done. Going to look at this one. Is pretty floppy, kind of a crazy kind of a plant going on here. But it looks like it's got a very nice root system. So I am going to plant it like I did the other one. Okay, there we go with that. All right. Now this one's going to be a hanger, looks like a hanging one. So it's just going to make sure as I work here that I do get all of the roots covered, because you definitely, like I said, want as much root coverage as possible. Okay. Now, I believe I have at least 2 more mini terracotta pots. I've got 1, 2, 3. So I might even put these two, since the root systems aren't that large, together into one pot, since it's the same pot, and then put this one into its own pot as well. All right. So now what I'm going to be doing is I am going to be, as mentioned, finishing the potting with these other guys, give them their lucky rock. Once I finish those, I'll put it in here, put it back in the southern exposure window that I had these beauties in. It's really good when you are potting up cuttings to put them back to where you had them when they rooted, so that is a way to help prevent shock, transplant shock, to put them back into the same environment. So I will be doing that. After I see them starting to put on new growth, that tells me that the roots are growing underneath as in the soil as well. I will go ahead and use a cactus succulent fertilizer. I did put a little bit of this perky plant succulent fertilizer in the water, just a tad, like a tiny bit. It was probably a 1/16 or even less of probably about a 1/16 in this full thing. So it was very little, but a little bit of nutrients, because they have been in that the propagation mix. I did fertilize them a few times. I'll put the fertilizers that I use, the actual fertilizers that I used, as well as and I also use a rooting hormone mixed water in the water as well. I'll put that link below for you as well. But now that they're in a regular soil, I want to give them a regular cactus succulent fertilizer. Okay, but as mentioned, for a full feeding, I'm going to wait a while until they start to put on new growth. And I am heading into winter, so if I don't see any new growth, hopefully I do. I should within a month or so from now, and at that point I'll do a feeding, but it'll be the final feeding until early spring, because you don't want to over fertilize, especially in the winter months. Okay, so we will check back in, see how these guys are doing, see if we get all of these guys to go ahead and survive this and grow and thrive. So check in when that is occurring. Thank you for stopping by today. Please leave any comments about any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And please check the bell if you'd like to be notified when new videos are released.